According to Chinese medicine, coldness is the public enemy #1 of our health. So why is coldness such important for our health, and what are the consequences of coldness on our body and our mind? And more important, what can we do to prevent and to manage the damages caused by coldness? So in this video, we'll go through all the Chinese medicine theories around the harmful effect of coldness, the impact on our body, and also give you some techniques to be able to prevent and manage these conditions. So we will start to talk about external coldness. So what we mean by external coldness is really the weather. So a cold weather, and especially what we call wind cold. So when it's both windy and cold in the weather. And this has an impact on what we call the surface in Chinese medicine, which is really about the musculoskeletal system and the respiratory system in general. So the first thing we'll see is the impact of cold weather on the respiratory system, and there is a lot of things. So first, a cold air can reduce the ability of the immune system to fight against aggressions from microbes and viruses. So this is why we talk about catching cold, right? It's when we get a breeze of cold air, or maybe there is air conditioning going on or something like that, and we can get cold, right? We can catch a cold. This is because the immune system is reduced, and then the microbes can start to create an infection. So that's the first aspect. There is also the idea that cold air can congeal the mucus that is protecting our airways. So when it does that, it can create some phlegm, and also it will impair the ability of the respiratory system to fight against aggression by using production of mucus. And the third aspect is that the cold air will also constrict the airways, which need to be unblocked to be able to function well. So when it's constricting the airways, really blocking the flow of air in the airways. So one of the consequences of the impact of coldness is as we already mentioned, catching cold, which is getting an inflammatory bacterial or microbe or virus infection in our respiratory tract. So we're talking, of course, about common cold, but also all kind of viruses and microbes, including COVID, really, which has been affected to be sometimes more impactful when the weather is very cold. So that's the first one. The second one is rhinitis, which is also in Chinese medicine associated a lot with coldness, and it's very easy to have episodes of rhinitis. So it can be chronic rhinitis, and then there's acute episodes due to cold weather or due to catching cold from air conditioning or something else. Finally, there is asthma, which is also the same as rhinitis, a lot connected with the cold weather and recurrent episodes of catching cold again and again. And so we consider in Chinese medicine that this wind cold or cold weather is affecting especially this part of the body, which is the back and the neck area, and which is also related with all the respiratory systems. So that's why we need to get rid of this coldness here to make these conditions better, rhinitis, asthma, etc. But we'll talk about that later. The second system that is impacted by coldness is the musculoskeletal system. And it's very straightforward because we tend to say that we need warm up when we're doing exercise first, otherwise we may injure ourselves. So it makes a lot of sense that warmth is very useful for the musculoskeletal system. And 2000 years ago in our Chinese medicine classic, the Yellow Emperor classics, there is a citation that's saying that when the yang qi, which is the warmth, is making the muscle smooth, And so we need this warmth from the body, from the energy, to have smooth muscle, and that's why we need the warm up so much. So what can happen if we get cold from the outside? So a typical example will be neck pain. We see that in the clinic all the time, and it's generally a white collar who work in an office and there is air conditioning all the time. What happens in summer when they're sweating, the pores are open, and this cold weather start to impact the muscles, especially in the neck and back area, and this create tensions in the muscles, and that's why they develop this neck pain. That's very common in the clinic. Another thing is fibromyalgia, which is also related with coldness in the muscles, in the musculoskeletal tissues, that is constricting all these smooth tissues and tendons, etc., and creating some tension and pain all around the body. So that's a second aspect. And the third aspect I would say is arthritis. So again, problems for joint can be osteoarthritis, but we see that in rheumatoid arthritis, other type of inflammatory condition as well. We all know that cold and damp weather will make this joint pain, this arthritis worse. So it's another example of how the coldness can affect the soft tissues, the joint, the tendons, etc., and create pain in the body. The third aspect is something we actually may not think about that much, and it's not very common sense, especially in the West, is gynecological conditions. And there is a reason for that, is because coldness tend to affect the body from the lower part of the body, especially from the feet. And we have three channels that comes from the feet and goes all the way to the pubic area, to genital organs. So in the female, it would be to the uterus. And when we are affected by coldness, especially from the feet or from the legs, this coldness can actually go upwards up to the uterus and create what we call uterus coldness. So that means some gynecological conditions that are related with coldness. And the most, I would say the most common one, or the most straightforward one, would be period pain, which we know is very easily affected by coldness. And especially when young girls, or not necessarily young girls, but when females want to wear skirts, and it may already be quite cold in terms of weather, uh, then the coldness can very easily go from the legs up to the genital organs and create this period pain or aggravate this period pain. And we see that even in conditions such as endometriosis, which is more and more common nowadays, and which is not so surprising considering the lifestyle that is going on in modern societies. So another one is infertility, and again, this infertility is very commonly related with coldness in the uterus, and we tend to want to warm up the uterus to make it better. It's not always the case, but coldness in the uterus is definitely one of the main patterns of infertility and period pain, etc. So, what can we do to prevent and manage the damage from the coldness or cold weather to our body, the respiratory, the muscular, and the gynecological systems? So, first thing, of course, will be to avoid wind cold weather as much as possible. So when you know that the weather is very cold, you will have to wear more clothes, and try to be especially careful when you're sweating. So it can be either after a hot bath or after a hot shower, or it can be after exercising. Anything that makes you sweat, you will have to be double careful because your pores are open and they will be very vulnerable to wind cold from the exterior. So that's one thing. Um, be very careful again about this area of the body, so the upper back and the neck area. We have lots of points that are called the wind points. So we have Feng Fu here, we have Feng Men here. All these points will be very vulnerable to wind cold from the back. So be very careful and make sure you cover these areas appropriately when it's cold. Now, another thing will be to avoid from the feet, coldness from the feet, because we have a saying in Chinese medicine that coldness attacks from the feet. So in order to avoid this coldness from the feet, we have to be careful to wear socks. That may seem straightforward, but it's very important. And feel free to wear 2 pairs of socks, 3 pairs of socks. It fits very cold weather. There's no problem with that. Now, if you have a cold floor at home, make sure you don't walk on this floor even with your socks, because it's not enough. You'll have to wear slippers, and especially thick slippers, so you're sure that your feet will not get cold from the coldness of the floor. It's something that is very important, again, especially in these gynaecological conditions. So this is mostly for prevention. What can we do if the coldness is already in the body? So one very common, we have lots of ways to deal with that in Chinese medicine. One way will be using cupping and gua sha. So again, this will be very useful for, especially for the back area, to remove the coldness from this area. So very good for respiratory infections, for asthma, for rhinitis, and also for musculoskeletal pain as well. We use it all the time. Another way to treat this external coldness will be with hot bath, and especially if you use some herbs with the bath. So you can use a bit of ginger, shanjiang, aye, etc. To warm up the bath and make it have a even warmer effect. And even if you don't have a bathtub, think about food bath, which can be excellent, especially in gynecological conditions that are related with coldness. Again, think about using shanjiang, aye, etc., or some blood-moving herbs to remove this coldness from the channels. We can think, of course, about massage. Massage are very warming the channels, especially, and moving qi and blood in the channels. And especially if you use essential oils, so I do that a lot. I tend to use wintergreen, juniper berries, or cinnamon, these kind of essential oils, to improve and increase the warming effect of the massage. And we can use them for, of course, for gua sha and cupping as well, these essential oils. Another way that is very straightforward is using moxa, and lots of people can use it just at home. It's very convenient. You can check our video on moxibustion, because we have a full video explaining how to do this, perform these methods. So this is also an aspect, and we have also, in case of, I would say, persistent pain and severe conditions, we have fire needles, which is basically burning the acupuncture needle before we insert them in the body. This is technically is a bit painful, so that's why we don't use it that much, but it can be very effective for some cold-related pain, some severe cases. Of course, think about all the herbs that we use as a decoction to relieve the coldness from the surface. So think about mahong, guizhi, fangfeng, etc., etc. And they can be supplemented also with young warming herbs, fuzi, rou gui, ganjiang, etc., etc. Now let's talk a bit about internal coldness. So when we talk about internal coldness, this comes really from the intake of cold food and drinks. So what do we mean by cold food and drinks? Of course, this is about the temperature, so especially water. So in Chinese culture, we tend to use hot water and not cold water. And you might start to say, yes, but I don't drink cold water, I just drink normal water. Well, what we mean really by cold water is room temperature water. So the water tends to be yin and cold in nature. That's why we're using, for example, canals to cool down the city, or that's why we like to jump in the swimming pool in summer to cool us down. So water, by in essence, it has this cooling nature. But this is very harmful to the body because our body needs yang qi to be able to function well. So by yang qi, we mean really the energy and the warmth of the body. And this is our whole metabolic system, physiological system. So think about the respiratory system, cardiovascular system, everything, digestion, reproductive functions, everything relies on this energy and warmth to be able to function well. Our mind as well, or being able to, think properly, etc. Everything relies on this ability of the yang qi to have enough, and also to be able to move around. So when we use cold food and drinks, this will reduce this whole uh, warmth and energy of the system, and also it will congeal, so it will block the movement of the yang qi. So, which means that all the physiological functions will start to be impaired. So that's one of the reasons why we tend to drink hot water in Chinese culture, because we want to avoid all this damage caused by the room temperature water. Of course, you absolutely have to avoid all these icy drinks, so drinks directly from the fridge, or ice cubes and all these things. So I would say just avoid them completely. It's never a good option to have icy drinks at all. In addition to that, think about fruits as well, and especially fruits that are rich in water. So think about pear, for example, or watermelon, which is also a good example. Very cold fruits. Think about all the exotic fruits as well, such as the kiwi fruit that is very cold as well. So all these fruits, especially when they are taken raw, they tend to damage the yang qi as well. So you will need to limit as much as possible this type of food. Even though I know they may be considered as healthy food from a modern perspective. So another type of food is raw vegetables, and especially which type of vegetable, the ones that are full of water as well. So we mentioned already that water tends to be cold in nature, right? So think about green vegetables like salads. Think also about tomatoes. Think about cucumbers as well. So all these type of vegetables, they're very cold, and if you take them raw, it will damage your digestive system and your yang qi. So another type of food to avoid. In addition to that, any food that is taken directly from the fridge or is consumed cold or even freezing, that's always a bad decision. If you want to eat something from the fridge, you have to wait 20 minutes or half an hour before you consume it. The last one we want to talk about is the milk. Again, from a Chinese medicine perspective, milk has a cold nature and tends to be cooling. So that's why people in China generally don't take milk that much, and especially if it's cold milk. So there might be some health benefits of milk, of course, but again, you have to balance it a little bit. If you really want to have milk, try to have it warm and do not take it all the time, not every day. It should be something that is consumed from time to time only. So the first impact of these cold food and drinks we just mentioned, so ambient temperature, water, or raw fruits, raw vegetables, milk, etc. The first thing will be impacting the digestive system. And it's quite straightforward because these cold foods, they will tend to constrict the intestines, which will lack their elasticity and smooth movement. It can also to congeal the food together and make it harder. So it will be more difficult to process and to transform it. It's very straightforward when you think about it, because when you increase the heat of any substances, really, it will break down naturally, right? Or it will start to dissolve, or it will tend to become smaller parts. And that's why the same thing happens in the guts. If we increase the heat, it will make it easier to transform the food. But if you reduce the heat, if you reduce the temperature, it will congeal, make blocks, and become harder to digest. And also think about the microbiome, because there needs to be a very specific temperature for some bacteria to exist in our gut. And these bacteria have a really important role in digestion. So if we have the wrong temperature in our gut, we may not have the right microbes, which will impact also digestion. So we see this impact of cold nature, of cold food and cold drinks in conditions such as chronic diarrhea. We see that a lot, which is most of the time related with coldness. Stomach pain, a lot of cases is related with coldness as well. Generally, if it's not stress related, it will be related with coldness. And finally, IBS is also another example, widely present in Western societies, and cold food and drinks are one of the main reasons of that. We also see the impact of cold food and drinks in metabolic system. So think about that. When we're reducing the energy of the whole system, it means it will become more difficult to use this energy to transform all the substances in the body, isn't it? Think about conditions such as obesity, which is the body having trouble to metabolizing all the fat tissues. And when we are having cold drinks and foods, we reduce its ability to transform the fat tissues, which means more accumulation of fat tissues in the body. Think about diabetes as well. So again, we're reducing the ability of the body to transform sugar, which means the glycemia will start to increase. In addition to the impact on the digestive system and the metabolic system, there's also a detrimental impact on the immune function. So think about that. When you're having an infection, your body will create fever. And why does your body create fever? Because when the temperature of the body is higher, the immune system will be enhanced, it will be stronger, and it will be more able to fight against microbes and viruses, isn't it? So if higher temperature helps the body to fight against infections, if you reduce the temperature of the body with cold food and drinks, you will reduce the ability of the immune system to fight against enemies. So, of course, this means that people who have what we call a yang deficiency constitution, so who have a constitutional lack of warmth and energy in their body, they will tend to be very vulnerable to wind cold and to infections in general. So they will tend to have respiratory infections more than other people. In addition to that, there is also allergies. So we already mentioned rhinitis and asthma, but we see that also in some skin allergies as well. So when we're reducing the warmth and the energy of the body, it tends again to develop this type of allergic reactions. And many people who have allergic reaction and allergies do have this constitutional yang deficiency, so this lack of warmth and energy in their body. Finally, there is also some people mention the importance of yang qi to fight against cancer, and that some people who have cancer may have at the origin again a yang deficiency constitution. So they basically their immune system is too weak to fight against cancer cells and has trouble to keep them under control. So if you have a yang deficiency constitution, you may have the following symptoms or signs and symptoms. So your tongue may be more pale and a bit dark as well. Your face may tend to be a bit more pale and a bit dark as well. Same for your nails and your lips. Also, you may experience coldness in the limbs, especially in the feet. You may have diarrhea easily. You may react very quickly to unhealthy foods. You may develop some pain in your body as well, quite relatively easily. And finally, you may feel some coldness on your belly as well. So if you have this yang deficiency, what can you do about it? One of the first thing, of course, will be to avoid cold food and cold drinks. So avoid even room temperature water. Try to have hot water, right? Avoid having too many fruits during the day. And when you're eating vegetables, try to have them cooked. So simply by having stir-fried and baked food, for example, you may be able to increase the warmth nature of the food, which will make it better to digest and produce energy in the body. Think about using spices as well. So I like to use a lot of spices when I am having vegetables as well, to increase a little bit the warm nature. So you can think about things such as cinnamon, ginger, think about clove, all these fennel seeds, all these spices can increase the warm nature of the food. And you can use them in beverages as well. So ginger on fennel seeds, they're very good to use in infusion as well. In addition to that, think about herbs that, we're talking about decoction now, or granules. Think about herbs that have a hot nature, such as, again, 附子、肉桂、干姜、小茴香、桂枝. Think about shanjiang as well. Think about 八极天, 菟丝子. All these herbs have a warming nature, so they can be very helpful if people have a yang deficiency constitution. Again, another one is meditation. It may not seem very straightforward for yang deficiency, but meditation can actually take the fire from the upper jaw and bring it down to the lower jaw. So that's also a very good technique to bring down the fire and keep our fire in the body. So why is it so important to keep the warmth in the lower jaw? Because here, the waist area, where there is a lower abdomen and lower back, this is the source of our yang qi. So this is really where our warmth and energy comes from, and it's especially important to keep the warmth here in this region. So if you have internal coldness, be very careful about your clothes as well. You really want to make sure that this area here is well protected and kept warm. So we sometimes we even use like heat pad, or there are also like herbal pads that can be used, even patches, herbal patches, these sort of things, to keep this area very warm and remove the coldness from the internal part of the body. I am Yoann Birling, a clinician, lecturer, and researcher in Chinese medicine. Please feel free to like this video if you did, and subscribe to our channel for more videos on health, psychology, and Chinese medicine.